Welcome to another Coach's Corner. Today we look at building speed and endurance at the same time,
strength versus mobility,
cycle training on a spinning bike,
incorporating training sessions together,
and the most common mistakes that runners make when starting triathlon.
Well, before we crack on with the questions and their answers, just a quick reminder to click on the globe and the bell icon so you'll be notified of every time a new video comes out. And of course, if you do have a question yourself, you just need to use that hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, leave it beneath any of our videos.
Yep. Okay, first question. D Chang asks, GTN Coaches Corner, how do I train for endurance events while maintaining your close to top end speed? For example, I would like to break 60 seconds for 400 meter, and I'm currently maybe 2 to 3 seconds short, and improve my 5 kilometer to half marathon PB at the same time. I'll be happy for a sub 60 seconds once I get there. I just want to maintain and not go any faster. But I would like to keep getting faster on the half marathon up to 5Ks and keep smashing PBs. Do I need more strength training? Do more 200 meter sprints at the end of my interval session? All the info I found online is either sprints or long distance, but in reality, I think amateur athletes like me want to have multiple contradicting goals at the same time. How can I achieve it? Well, this guy really does want it all, doesn't he?
Yeah, and you are right with saying that lots of us want goals that maybe don't complement each other, but this is going to quite the extreme. And I think you first of all have to ask yourself, what is the most important aspect? Because that's where you're going to need to focus your training, because you're working completely different systems, it's different types of training, and it could almost end up detrimenting both if you try to do both, because you'll be negatively affecting one whilst working on the other and vice versa. So yeah, I think that's the first question.
Yeah, essentially there are different energy systems for 60-second effort and for a half marathon or anything longer than about 3 or 4 minutes. And so your training is kind of completely separate. There will be some crossover. Your neuromuscular recruitment, your flexibility, your strength will translate between the two, and you may even find yourself getting faster while you train for a half marathon, getting faster on your 60-second all-out effort, just as your fitness improves. But if you want to do specific training, unfortunately, there are two completely separate training programs, and not only will one not really complement the other one, the fatigue from one might really affect your ability to do the other. So doing them both at the same time is quite difficult and probably not recommended, actually. You have to kind of decide what, as Heather says, what's most important to you. Focus mostly on that, and the other one you can still try it and work towards, but don't get too hung up on it if it's not going the right direction all the time.
Yeah, let us know which you choose and how you get on with that. Good luck. Our next question comes from Renaissance WW. Time is always limited and trying to fit in strength training is tough. But what about mobility? If you can only do one, which would benefit the triathlete more, yoga or strength training?
That is a tough question. Well, I'd say mobility, mobility. I guess it really depends on where your limiting factor is. If you are really, really stiff and inflexible, you're going to get most benefits by fixing that, by being better at your flexibility. You can improve your range of motion in your shoulders and your hips. That will make a big difference, so you should spend some time doing that. However, if you're already fairly flexible, you're going to get some big benefits by building your strength, and so you need to figure out where you're going to get the most gains for your time. Now, ideally you would do both, and the way you do this as a triathlete is to realize that flexibility doesn't really need to be built in an hour session once a week in the gym. You can work on your flexibility all the time, every day, in 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, 5 to 10 minutes in the evening, while you're watching TV in the evening. You can work on those limiters. If you have tight hips, you can get into a position or a stretch that stretches your hips while you're watching TV. And if you do little 5 to 10 minutes every day, you'll find your flexibility improves, and then that hour that you have, you can get into the gym and do some proper strength work with a bit of mobility thrown in there for good measure during the recovery intervals. I hope that helps. It is hard to do both at once, but we would say if you work around your life, you can actually do both.
Our next question comes in from Eric Hallengren, and he says, hey guys, I'm doing a half Ironman at the beginning of June, but due to work, I'll have limited access to my bike and trainer. Will I be able to substitute it with a spin bike, and what do I need to take into account? I'm a decent cyclist and hoping for a sub 5 goal time. Well, Eric, you certainly are a good decent cyclist, so that's your goal time, and hopefully you can still get there with a spin bike, because yes, it's most certainly beneficial to be able to use one, but there's a few things you want to bear in mind. So first up, when you're going to this bike, bike, you want to try and set it up as close to your usual bike as possible. So that might even involve taking some measurements from your bike at home and taking that to the spin class with you. Once you know those measurements on there, you wouldn't have to take your tape measure every time you go to a session. Using your own bike shoes, and that might mean taking your own pedals as well, will be vital. So getting that power transfer and again, making everything as close to reality as possible. And then just because you're on a spin bike, you don't have to do a spin class. I mean, most gyms will have spin bikes just there that you can go and use at any point. And maybe you're already planning this, but still try to replicate your sessions. You're going to have to go off RPE on most spin bikes. I know some have power, but even if they do, just bear in mind that power might be quite skewed, so you'll get to know what your RPE is like compared to that power, and each bike can vary. So I would really go on heart rate for that, or if you've got power pedals, that's another way to get it even more accurate. But it's just trying to replicate as much of your normal training onto that bike.
Yeah, you need to replicate that cadence, and yeah, as Heather says, you need to be that guy who brings a tape measure with you to the gym to get your setup right. Only the first time, and then you can know what your spinning bike needs to be set up like. But yeah, definitely take your own pedals and put them on there. And yeah, definitely you can use your spinning bike to train for it. Okay, next question. This one is from Mimi Marker, and he says, "Dear coaches, first of all, thanks for the great support talking physiology. I'm in preparation for my first Ironman 70.3. I'm trying to get the most benefit out of my Zwift workouts in limited time. Can I combine a VO2 max workout and a fat max workout by adding low intensity but long duration ride after a high intensity workout without compromising the effectiveness of one or the other? For example, 6 times 4 minutes in zone 5 followed by 90 minutes in zone 2. Or would it be best to have separate workouts on separate days to trigger the adaptation in either one?"
Okay, we're going to try a new little feature with this one. James, I'm going to challenge you. Can you answer that question in 60 seconds?
Oh, let's find out. Let's head over to the clock. Mimi Marker asks, can you combine VO2 max and fat max sessions in the same session? The quick answer is yes, you can. Your body sees stress and adapts to it. So if you put all that stress in one session, your body will do its best to adapt to it. But a word of warning on this, if you are going to include both of those sessions in one, you need to think very carefully about how you do it. You don't want to overload your body when it's already tired with high intensity work. So when you structure your session, you want to do the high intensity stuff first, when your form is good and you're feeling fresh, and then shift to the aerobic work and carry on for a longer session afterwards. But it does have the added advantage of course, depleting your glycogen while you do that high intensity stuff. But I will warn you that after you finish that high intensity stuff and you start trying to do your zone 2 stuff, the sudden drop in energy is going to be pretty dramatic and pretty hard to deal with.
Not a bad first effort, James. It does need to come with a word of warning though, so we've got a little bit more time to explain that it is hard. That's one of the reasons that it doesn't necessarily get prescribed very often, because if you are doing those hard efforts, they're mentally and physically tough on their own, but then to carry on for another couple of hours after, it's going to be quite draining. So you need to think about how important your recovery is going to be, and also getting that nutrition in, because normally after a hard VO2 style session, you want to get carbs and protein in pretty soon after. Also, if you're short on time, recovery becomes even more important in your overall training, and you could be compromising that by really pushing yourself a little bit further. So it just needs to be kind of addressed with caution, I think.
Yeah, cramming your training is not necessarily productive. It can be counterproductive if you are short on time. You know, fitting it all into one session might actually be less productive than splitting it up into lots of really short sessions. All right, on to our last question of the day, and it's from Vertico 24/7. He says, GTN Coach's Corner, I'm very much a runner who trains for marathons, but I'm looking into transitioning into tri in the not too distant future. Welcome to the dark side. I've already started some of this by slowly getting myself back into swimming after 10 plus years of not. Your Learn to Swim series has helped me immensely, making sure I get my technique right before I get too ahead of myself. Thank you. Okay, my question is, what are the most common mistakes that people make when transitioning from one discipline to 3? Is there something runners do wrong that is different to what cyclists or swimmers get wrong when moving into tri? Well, there are a lot of mistakes, and a lot of triathletes make them. It's hard to pinpoint specifically what they are. Generally, almost everyone comes into the sport of triathlon from a single sport of some type. They're either swimmers or bikers or runners or none of the 3, and they come into triathlon and they bring some good habits and good features with them, but they also bring some bad habits, and the trick is to bring the good habits and leave the bad habits behind. So generally what a runner would do, they would come into triathlon and they'd be really good at just going out every day and consistently doing the work. Because if you run every day, you will get better at running. and then they bring that to swimming and they hop into the pool and just swim every day. And you just don't get better at swimming because swimming is a technique sport. So that's one of the major mistakes that runners make. They think, well, I swim more and more and I'm not getting any faster. But you have to work on your technique with swimming, unlike running where you can generally just run every day and you will get faster.
And then cycling is different again. It takes more time to get the same benefits you would get from a session. So for running, for example, you could get a really decent session in 30 to 45 minutes, but cycling tends to need a bit longer. When it comes to the long bike ride compared to your long run, well, that's going to be 3-4 times the length of that. So you're going to have to factor a lot more time in. And you're also actually going to have to think about fueling a bit more during your training, because with running, unless you've been training for ultras or marathons, you might not have had to do much fueling during. And on the bike, that's certainly something you're going to have to dial in.
Yeah, these are some of the common mistakes that runners make, but there are lots of mistakes out there. Don't beat yourself up too much if you are making these mistakes, but try not to bring too many of the mistakes from your single sport into your triathlon. And also, one last thing, stop thinking of it as 3 separate sports. It is triathlon, they all tie into each other. Swimming affects cycling, cycling affects running and swimming, etc. They all tie in together. Triathlon is its own sport. Well, we hope today's answers and questions have helped you with your triathlon journey. If you have your own questions, remember, as we said, leave them in the comment section down below this video or any of our videos. Use the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, and next week we could be answering your questions. Thanks for watching.